All right, Kyung La, stay safe there in Miami Beach. We're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk to the governor of Florida. We're going to talk to Senator Marco Rubio, and we're going to talk to a first responder who is in harm's way east of Key West. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Went out to the middle of the street to try to get a measure of how strong the winds were blowing, and it was saying about 50 then. And as I was walking back, I heard this crash, and it was this sign that had come flying down. To give you a sense, this thing would cut somebody's head off if it
another couple of things. This is looking at the forecast radar. We go right now and we put it into motion, and it brings it up across the Florida Keys. And by the way, just about everyone in the Florida Keys has lost power. I saw a report from a woman who is in Great Pine Key. That's just to the north of Key West. And she said, I have about 8 inches of water in my home. Well, do you think that's just because of the rainfall? No, they hadn't gotten that much rainfall. There was water that was creeping up. That is the storm surge. When you see it kind of in real time like that, it's almost mind-boggling to think this isn't because of rain. It isn't because of rain. It's because the wall of water gets kind of pushed up because it is just such a tremendous system. There we go, right around Tampa, and you can see all these deeper red shaded areas. Well, those are some of the stronger bands that move along that upper right quadrant. That's where it's typical in a storm like this to expect and to see hurricanes. I want to point out one other thing. We were looking at this in the CNN Weather Department. There was just a very noticeable jog kind of to the north, just a little bit. That could be just like a little blip. Could be that it's just one of those little perturbations where it doesn't exactly make a straight line, but overall its movement is to the northwest and it's moving slowly. It's only moving at about 6 miles an hour. So it's slowed down. It's not barreling along like it had been, but it's slowed down. So you can imagine we were looking at landfall right about now. We were calling it yesterday. Now it's been moved another 24 hours. So if you were thinking, oh, I was on the East Coast, moved to the West Coast, and probably would have been better to stay over here, it's not better over here. It isn't better over here. There's still a storm surge. There are still winds at tropical storm force. In the Keys, we had our first report of a hurricane force wind gust there. And the storm, the hurricane Irma, is still 80 miles away. Now, in just about 30 minutes, we'll get another update from the National Hurricane Center. 26 million people under a hurricane warning. This is a storm surge. This is a problem. This is the illustration I was giving you about the woman who is on Big Pine Key. Purple shaded area, pink shaded area, 10 to 15 feet from the Everglades, Marco Island, to Naples, to Fort Myers, 6 to 10 feet, Tampa 5 to 8. All of that's going to change. If Harvey just stays a little bit further to the west in the warm waters, Irma, if it stays just a little bit further to the west, we're going to see that storm surge become even bigger. And there's a tropical storm watch now that includes Atlanta, Georgia. And some of the schools are saying, we're not going to open on Monday. It's a wait and see situation. Back to you guys.
Karen, very quickly, I know you're outlining the path it will take, but for our viewers in Florida Keys, those in Naples, they're sitting there watching, wanting to know when they should expecting it. You said 24 hours. Any idea in terms of time?
Because it has slowed down in its forward progression, it's moving northwest at 6 miles an hour. It's not moving northwest at 16 miles an hour. But yesterday I said, oh, it'll be about midnight on Saturday going into Sunday. Now we're saying Sunday late night. But there are comparisons that are being made to Hurricane Donna back in 1960. Why do we mention that? Because Irma has taken a similar path right across the Lesser Antilles, Turks and Caicos, the Leeward Islands, bounced along the north coast of Cuba, then made a turn towards the north, moved across the Keys, and then went in right around Fort Myers. Is that possible? Certainly is possible, but right now, it's very hard to say. All of those huge, beautiful cities along the west coast of Florida are very vulnerable, and any one spot could be the landfall location. Right now, it appears as if it could be the Sarasota area. Very warm water temperatures here, but it's that storm surge. The storm surge, he says, that's going to be huge. These are low-lying areas, and it's going to inundate homes and buildings and businesses. It's a terrible situation.
Karen McGuinness, thank you very much for that.
Getting the latest information. National Hurricane Center just updated the data. And it's not good news because now it's back up to Category 4. We were looking at this and it had a tightly wound eye as it just kind of bounced off that coast of Cuba and is now already hurricane force winds are being felt all across the Florida Keys from top to bottom. We've seen some wind gusts at 75 miles an hour. Some reports are that all of the Keys do not have power. We have reports of 200,000 plus people across the Florida Peninsula are without power. And you can imagine that that number is going to go up. It's still moving slowly. That's not a good thing either, because the slower it moves over the warm waters, we're still looking at it perhaps gaining even more intensity. So right now, associated with Irma, 130 mile an hour winds, Category 4 hurricane. All right, I was giving you the illustration of how this compares with Hurricane Donna, where on this date it made landfall in Florida as a Category 4 hurricane. And here is the path that Irma took, bouncing around along that coast of Cuba. We can only imagine what kind of damage that must have been, because it was for the better part of a day as a Category 3. But then here is Hurricane Donna. Moved across the Turks and Caicos, came close to Cuba, moved across the Florida Keys. Does this sound familiar? Well, that's just what Irma is doing. However, here is the cone. Let's take a look at this. This is its potential. That's a pretty wide mark to kind of hit. But if we were to split the difference here, go right up through the center, are we making landfall at Bradenton, Tampa, St. Pete, Sarasota? Right now, it looks like Sarasota, but this system has had so many iterations, has had so many incarnations that it would be very hard to predict right now. Every city all along this west coast of Florida is vulnerable. Here's our spaghetti models. We show you this all the time. They're in agreement that it's moving north. They're in agreement it's moving slightly northwest. But any wiggle room, even if it's 5 miles, 10 miles off the west coast of Florida, that's a huge impact. But what I will tell you, when I saw this, it floored me. We're still seeing this outer band. There's been an eye wall recycling here. Essentially, it's gotten stronger. But it made that little wobble more towards the northwest. So if you know anyone in the Florida Keys, chances are you're not going to be communicating with them because the storm surge here is supposed to be 5 to 10 feet. You go up towards the coast, towards Fort Myers, the beautiful Marco Island, and you're looking at 10-foot storm surge, maybe 12-foot storm surge. You could see about 10 inches of rainfall. Could see 20 inches of rainfall. That's kind of an outlier. But in this zone, that upper right quadrant, this is where we're looking at the potential for tornadic activity because it is so dynamic. It is this is the strongest portion of the hurricane typically, and you see these really strong outer bands where there's lots of lightning, there's twist in the atmosphere, there's lots of low-level moisture. We've got all the dynamics for really quite a disaster. Either tornadic activity, flooding rain, storm surge, wind damage. There are so many hazards associated with Hurricane Irma. Category 4 Hurricane Irma, the latest from the National Hurricane Center. And we'll have another update at the bottom of the hour, but this is an incredible system. It's almost beyond words right now. Michael, Isa?
Yeah, and you, as you said, you predicted it'd be up to a 4 again once it got over that warm water. Indeed it is, and a concern for everyone along that west coast of Florida. Karen McGinnis, thanks so much.
Yes, and you just said what I was going to mention is 288,000, and it hasn't even made landfall in the United States. It's still 70 miles away to the southeast of Key West, Florida. And just to mention that, Key West, they just reported a wind gust of 83 miles per hour. They're 70 miles away from the center of the hurricane, Grassy Key, a 74-mile-an-hour gust. In Miami just reported a 68-mile-an-hour wind gust. So as we go Sunday, right now, we're looking at some moderate to widespread power outages, and then we go through Sunday afternoon. Now, we still may not have landfall by Sunday afternoon. We may or may not. We'll get to that in just a second. And then it looks like the power outages primarily from that corridor from Orlando, Florida to Gainesville, towards Jacksonville, Florida, then up the coast towards Savannah, Georgia. So that's the scenario as it plays out now. But take a look at this. This has looked so impressive on the satellite imagery over the last few hours because this eye wall looks like it's really becoming much more concentric. When that happens, we know that it is strengthening. And you can see some of the orange and yellow bands around, I would say about 2/3 of the eye wall. We're seeing some of the stronger winds associated with that. And it's still 70 miles from Key West. So what are we anticipating now? Category 4. So it did increase in speed. From this latest information from the National Hurricane Center compared to its last advisory at 10 p.m., it increased in intensity 10 miles an hour. Ordinarily, I would say it's just a number. You should worry about the wind. You should worry about the storm surge. But this tells us it's really getting a lot stronger. And there is this tornado watch for South Florida, Brevard County, Palm Beach County, Dade County, extending over towards Collier. We're looking at the potential for tornadic activity. We've seen numerous reports of tornado warnings that have been issued. But look at some of the stronger bands right around Fort Pierce, along that I-95 corridor towards West Palm. We have seen some wind gusts that really are up near hurricane force. So they're strong tropical storm wind gusts. So what about that storm surge? Look at this, even on the eastern side. So if you were second guessing yourself, why did I leave the East Coast if it's affecting the West Coast? Because you have this onshore flow. Could expect the storm surge 6 to 8 feet, 10 to 12 feet. Some of these areas on the West Coast, we're looking at 10 to 15 feet, maybe 10, as much as 20 inches of rainfall is possible. When is landfall? Could be tomorrow night about midnight. Where? Maybe Sarasota, maybe Tampa, maybe Fort Myers. Our computer models are diverging on that right now. Michael, Isa?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? And 15 feet, I mean, it's hard to get your head around what that's going to do. Karen, thank you. We'll check in with you a little later. Karen McGinnis there. Now, I want to go.
Are found video and damage photos on social media.
Yeah, that's right. Irma is making it known that it is now in Florida. Take a look at this video. This was recorded in the Florida Keys just around midnight. Look at how heavy those winds are. Incredible. You can see the lightning, the heavy rain, and look at the palm trees as the fronds just lash in the wind. Incredible video there. It's a very scary sight down there right now. CBS Miami actually posted this video yesterday as Irma approached the Keys. You can see that heavy surf, the waves crashing on shore. and of course heavy winds and a lot of rain. And there's no beach or anything. The storm surge is just very dangerous there. And this is also in Miami on South Beach. Look at that. That's a stop sign blowing in the wind. Oftentimes we see these types of images when hurricanes blow through. And that just shows you how powerful this storm is. And it hasn't even made landfall yet. So you're seeing all the torrential rain and the wind. Trees are barely holding up. And of course, that stop sign was going crazy in the wind there. And the camera almost seems to not be able to record the winds because they're so high. And obviously, you don't want to step outside during something like this. And celebrities are even posting videos on Twitter. Take a look. This is from Enrique Iglesias. He posted this just before Irma lashed the city of Miami, telling everyone to stay safe. Now, let me show you some damage that these winds are leaving behind. Trees are actually getting knocked down. Look at that. That's a massive tree that has been uprooted. No surprise, really. You saw how strong those winds were. And since the road is soggy, or the ground is so soggy, we're going to be seeing a lot of this. Trees are also split in half. Winds are so strong, it knocked down this very large tree in someone's backyard. We don't think it hit someone's home, so that's the good news. And look at this. Debris scattered all across the sidewalk. You can see trees split in half. So this is why it's going to be dangerous to go outside during the storm. Electrical lines are down also. This is, I believe, in Sunny Isles, just outside of Miami. And this is only some of the damage, folks. We're going to be seeing a lot more widespread damage here in Southwest Florida as this storm moves through.
Corey, that is some amazing video. Every single piece of that video is just incredible. And it's really scary when you think about that. All that stuff is going to be coming here very shortly.
Oh, yeah. This is just the beginning, I'm sure, of seeing that damage video and pictures on social media, unfortunately.
Right.
But make sure to share it, and we'll definitely take a look at it. But we want to get to meteorologist Matt Devitt now. And
we have just under 300,000 people reportedly without power. Looks like the Florida Keys, no power because they've been seeing tropical storm force and hurricane force winds for the past 4 or 5 hours at least. All right. One of the things as I was standing here waiting to go on the air that I noticed is it looks like a cluster of thunderstorms, this part of the outer bands, kind of making its way towards Cape Canaveral, Kennedy Space Center. I'll be interested to see some of the observations coming out of that area as well. And very interesting, as Irma was hugging that northern coast of Cuba as a Category 5, then 4, really must have been terribly battered. But now we're less than 70 miles south-southeast from Key West, Florida. We've had some wind gusts right around Miami at 68-mile-an-hour winds. Fisher Island, I believe, had close to 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts. So tropical storm force winds. So did you second guess yourself as to whether you should have left the east coast of Florida where there were mandatory evacuations? You probably were once the track started changing. And it's still very frustrating to look at what's happening over the next 24 hours. So here it is. The eye is becoming very it's warbling a little bit. It's one of those little perturbations. You've probably heard me. That's kind of my key word. When it doesn't follow that exact track, when it just makes a beeline for something, it just kind of wiggles a little bit because it's slowed down a lot too. So it's got a lot of thinking going on as it kind of navigates very warm waters here off the coast of Florida. It looks like the Florida Keys already seeing storm surge. They're not very high there, so could be inundated with lots of storm water as those waters rise, 8 to 10 feet possible. This is an RPM. This doesn't really show where the eye is going to be, but it just kind of shows you the wind field here. And where you see that purple, 60 miles an hour, where you see there's no color, that's in excess of 100 mile per hour winds. And then we look at Tuesday, and they're saying they've shut down some of the public schools already for the beginning of the week in many sections of Georgia because, frankly, there's still a lot of uncertainty as to what will happen with Category 4 Hurricane Irma. There is still this tornado watch out for the most dynamic part of the hurricane right now. This is very typical. And there's almost this east-west component where some of these stronger bands are coming on shore. But what we were looking at earlier, and I'm going to zoom in on this, there you can see already in Key West, we've seen winds in excess of hurricane force, 83 miles per hour reported at Key West. still a little less than 70 miles away, and already hurricane force winds. Already starting to see the storm surge, and you've probably got another 6 or 8 hours before it even gets to Key West. So if you're already feeling the effects that strongly there, just think what happens when the eye, as a Category 4, maybe a Category 5 by the time it makes its way there. If you can only imagine how that impact is going to be. But from Melbourne to Fort Pierce, all the way down to Fort Lauderdale, tropical storm force winds, power outages reported here. Tampa, Sarasota. Sarasota, you're looking at more than likely, the computer models are saying, maybe landfall in Sarasota, but not until tomorrow night. Isa?
Tom?
Well, you were just talking, Anderson, about what it's going to look like when it gets to other states. So I thought I'd go right in to show the 21 models that make up the U.S. model, the GFS. Once it makes its way through southern Georgia and moving into northern Alabama, I want to let everybody make sure that they know this. If they don't know the country well enough, they're watching on the West Coast and never been to the Southeast. This area is pine country, hardy pine. Really tall, massive trees that have extremely weak root systems. And you get heavy rain on those roots and you get a stiff wind. We're going to have tens of thousands of trees down. So power outages will not just be across the Florida Peninsula. They're going to make their way up toward Atlanta and the surrounding areas, Alabama, Birmingham.